Hello everybody. My name is Garry Waterfall. I'm a retired Royal Air Force officer. I joined the Royal Air Force straight from school. Very privileged and lucky to, at the end of flying training, to have been selected to fly the Harrier aircraft. I flew initially the Harrier GR3 and the T4 before quickly going to the front line, flying on the GR5 and the GR7. I spent all of my flying career flying the Harrier until 2010. And in December of 2010, I was the station commander at RAF Cottesmore when the Strategic Defence Review announced that we would retire the Harrier prematurely from service. And I was involved with the last flight of the Harrier, which is the backdrop you see behind me, the 16 ship formation, which we flew over a number of bases. So extensively flying the Harrier throughout my career, interspersed obviously with ground jobs, as every sort of Air Force officer and pilot goes if they have a career stream. And also very fortunate, I displayed the Harrier aircraft in the 1996 season. I displayed it around UK and Europe, and then went from there to join the Royal Air Force aerobatic team, the Red Arrows, where I spent three very long and happy years as a team pilot on the Red Arrows, flying in the number 3 position, and then 2 years flying in the number 9 position. So when I finished my flying training, which finished at the Harrier Operational Conversion Unit, which at the time was 233 OCU with a Wildcat as its emblem, I was then posted out to RAF Germany, RAF Gütersloh, to join 3 Fighter Squadron. And I stayed with 3 Fighter Squadron for 2 tours, an initial tour at RAF Gütersloh, and then I came back to Wittering to do my qualified weapons instructor course, and then went back out to join number 3 Squadron. When I came back from Germany, I came back with my new wife, who actually was an officer. She was the adjutant and intelligence officer on number 4 Squadron, which also had Harriers out in Germany. I came back into the UK, and there I became on the staff of the weapons instructor outfit on the conversion unit, which by that stage had become number 20 Squadron. From there, I went to the Red Arrows. When I came back from the Red Arrows, I was a squadron leader, and I was posted on to number 1 Squadron as a flight commander. And following a ground tour and promotion to wing commander, I then did my squadron commander tour on the Fast Jet Weapons OEU Operational Evaluation Unit, which became number 41 Squadron, Test and Evaluation Squadron, where we had not only Harriers, but during my time, I also had the privilege to look after Tornadoes, GR1 and F3 Jaguar, and we had both marks of Harrier, be it the GR7 and the GR9. Do you know, I think, Alex, anyone who tries to stumble into it is going to have the door closed in their face unless they're exceptionally gifted. As we all know, and that's why we're talking tonight. You've got to have a passion for the air environment and everything else that goes with it, because it's broader than just air, isn't it? It's teaching you leadership skills, it's teaching you wider community skills, and frankly, the Air Training Corps or the Combined Cadet Force helps you become a much, much better member of society. For me, as a school child, my father actually was in the Air Force, so aviation was in my blood. He was an engineer. And I went to a school up in Grantham, which had a combined cadet force. I joined the combined cadet force, really enjoyed it. And through the combined cadet force, I got my glider pilot's license. I had my pilot's license, all by the age of 17. I went on the International Air Cadet Exchange as I left school at 18. And from there, just walked into the Royal Air Force, having been selected and allowed to join before going to without going to university. So, Alex, that's a really good question, because anybody can drive a car by themselves. Anybody can fly an airplane by themselves. And don't be fooled that you don't need teamwork in a single-seat aircraft, such as the F-35 or the Typhoon of today. The Harrier was a challenging aeroplane to fly, and it got easier over time. So you had to have everybody pulling together. And that wasn't necessarily your wingman or the number 3 or the number 4 or the 5 or the 6 or the 7 or 8 in the formation, operating as a team to get you to the target at the time. And if it is in that case, then you're always talking between yourselves, sharing information. You might be the leader of the formation, but it might be number 4 who's got the best information about the adversary, about the target, and is then tactically controlling that formation. But you wouldn't be there in the air had the supply organisation not got everything to the aircraft on time, had the engineers not turned the aircraft on time, had the air traffickers not been in the right place to sequence you into getting into the air. And I think, so with the there comes two real virtues and two real skills, which is not unique to the military environment, but it really brings it out loud and clear. That's teamwork and that's leadership. And with leadership comes the other thing, which I call followership. Because whilst you might be the leader, you also have to be a very good follower, and you have to work together as a team. Look at the Formula One world. Really, really fortunate if you're Lewis Hamilton, get to drive the fast car around the track. Lewis Hamilton wouldn't even get out of the pit lane were it not for the hundreds of people that are connected to put him in that car. And I think it's just the same in that air environment. I think where it really came out for me was in my 3 years on the Red Arrows, again, a single-seat aeroplane, completely reliant on the other 8 pilots doing their job in the air. Some of the formations we would fly, when I was down the back as Red 9, I would be way, way away from the leader, and I'd have lots of aircraft around me, which I'd be ignoring, trying to look through them just to concentrate on the leader, because I could trust each and every one of the other pilots to keep his airplane in the right place of sky. That trust extended to when we landed in a foreign base somewhere. I know one of the pilots had sorted out the customs. Somebody else had sorted out where we're going to eat. Someone else had sorted out the motor transport. And then I'd have my own jobs to attend to as well, maybe the navigation. And you didn't have to check on anyone because you could rely on them. And I think that's one of the really good things about cadet movement is it teaches you the leadership, it teaches you teamwork, it teaches you how to rely on people and what it's like to be relied upon. And there's nothing worse, and I know you must have already found this, there's nothing worse that if things don't go right with the cadets and it's because you haven't put your effort in, you feel really bad because you've let people down. I've got lots of memories. I mean, I've been really fortunate in my career, a really, really rewarding career. And I've spoke at the start and really I ended speaking in terms of when the Harrier stopped and had to retire, which is a memory that will stay with me forever, December 2010. The decision was announced and we only had 2 months effectively to gracefully retire the aeroplane. That as a 2-month journey will stay with me forever. The pride I have of sitting at the head of that formation and having a responsibility for the last bow of the UK Harrier in service and landing. Beyond that, I always say to people, I almost had 2 careers in the military because after I finished being a station commander, in fact, I hadn't quite shut down the station. Operation Elemi started in 2011, and that was the campaign over the skies of Libya to uphold the United Nations Security Council resolution to keep the people, the civilians on the ground in Libya safe and secure. I was really fortunate I was selected, I was promoted, and I was deployed out to Italy to be in charge of the UK air component. A roller coaster of a 5-month ride in charge of UK air effort in a multinational campaign. I went from there in 2012 to look after the Olympics. So I was the deputy air component for the air security of the Olympics. I then looked after the Typhoon Force for a bit, for about a year, 18 months before being promoted to Air Vice Marshal, where I became Air Officer Commanding Number 1 Group. Now, Number 1 Group looks after the combat arm of the Royal Air Force. So that is another real proud moment for me, a real stick out in terms of things I never thought I'd ever do when I was bashing the parade square as a cadet, that's for sure. And then my last job before leaving was a defence job, so not within the Air Force, although still wearing an Air Force uniform, at what we call the Permanent Joint Headquarters. And it's from there that they, and I was responsible for the planning and executing all operations around the world for any of the services. So I've got a whole host of highlights. And I think when I look back at it all, flying aeroplanes is definitely right up there, without a shadow of a doubt, be it flying the Harrier, flying a Red Arrow, even flying a Jet Provost, going through flying training. Even now, I can instantly think of memories back in the late 80s, flying a Jet Provost or flying a Hawk, going through my flying training as if I'm there. So I'm really lucky. I've got a whole career littered with great memories. Yeah. So every design of an aeroplane is a compromise. It absolutely is. Because look at the airlines that fly around the world. Everyone would want them to be supersonic, wouldn't they? But they can't be if you're going to carry that much baggage, that much people, and go for those distances. The Harrier was no different. The Harrier was built around the need for vertical takeoff and landing. So ostensibly, it's an engine with some wings stuck on the side of it. And if you're going to do vertical landings, you're going to be limited with how much weight you can have on the aeroplane. So therefore, you're limited in the safety systems you can have attached. You're limited in the number of bombs you can carry. So the early Harrier, the GR3, the GR1 and the Kestrel, very basic aeroplanes, very little to help you fly the aeroplane in terms of navigation, in terms of stability augmentation, and very little in the way of ordnance that you could effectively carry. And its role was sit in Germany when we had the Cold War in place, to do close air support, to dash across the border, and then dash back to your dispersed operating sites to refuel, rearm, and go at it again. The Harrier 2, the GR5, the GR7, took it on a generation. It's a heavier aeroplane. The wing is much, much bigger, far more maneuverable. The systems inside the aircraft with a GPS guidance to it, with a very smart inertial platform to start with, a far better platform to prosecute attacks in terms of bombing, a better aircraft to sit in and fight, more maneuverable, and more pylons so it could carry more ordnance and more fuel and go much further. To put it in perspective, the Harrier GR3, its fuel load, including tanks of fuel, was £1,000 less than the new Harrier could fly just with internal fuel without putting any wing tanks on. So a big difference there. And then, of course, with the Harrier 2, the GR5, when we went to the GR7, that took it into the night attack era. Forward-looking infrared, night vision goggles allowed you to turn night into day, so you could fly around quite happily at 250 feet or 100 feet at night using the goggles and using that forward-looking infrared. The last journey for the Harrier in UK was the Harrier GR9. So that was an upgrade on the GR7. It also came with a bigger engine, both for the GR7 and the GR9, the 107 engine. It gave the aeroplane about £24,500 of thrust, which was about a good 15% increase in earlier marks, and a lot of increase on the early marks of the Harrier. And the GR9 took it to real precision bombing, to be able to use the Paveway 4 and the Brimstone weapons. So we're not now talking about bombing a football field or even the penalty square of the football field or the penalty spot. We're talking about a bit on the penalty spot at an angle where you'd like the bomb to arrive, at a time of your choosing, and where you'd like the bomb to explode. So turning accuracy into precision. So that really sort of charts the differences. And all through all of that, there were augmentation done to make the aeroplane easier to fly. The early Harrier was a horrible aeroplane to fly. It took a lot of effort to keep it on the straight and narrow, and sadly we lost a lot of brave aviators in the course of executing their duties. By the time we got to the Harrier 2, the GR7, the GR9, a much, much safer aircraft, a much easier aeroplane to fly, to enable you to use all of your concentration in operating the aeroplane. And if we take that now to the modern variant, the F-35, or indeed the Typhoon, yeah, ostensibly a really easy aircraft to actually fly. Easier to fly than it is a Cessna or something like that, I would offer. It's just far more difficult to operate. So clearly, it might not look it, but I joined the Air Force a couple of years ago, more than a couple of years ago. So my advice could be considered a little bit stale, but I don't think it is. So advice point number one, be yourself. You can pretend to be whoever you want to be, but ultimately through the selection process and when you start training, you will get found out for who you are really early on. So fess up and be honest about who you are. Nobody's perfect. And by doing that, people will get to trust you and bond with you a lot easier than if you try and project yourself into something that you're not really comfortable doing. And the Air Force is really good in terms of its diverse nature because they take absolutely everybody. My advice number two is work hard and then work harder still. Anybody joins the military, full stop, does it because they're not just thinking about tripping into a job. What shall I do? Oh, the Air Force, that sounds interesting. It's because they want to do it. It's a vocation. It can swallow up 24 hours of your day, months of your life away on operations, but with a great bond of people that you've got to know and love. So you've got to work at it and you've got to dedicate yourself to it. That goes right the way back to the really privileged young cadets that have just joined your squadron. They need to work hard. They need to work hard at cadets. They need to work hard at their studies. I made a fool of myself when I got to my A-levels because I already had a place in the Air Force. I elected not to work that hard because I knew I had a place in the Air Force. I was a fool because I didn't have a plan B. Because dedicating yourself to the military is a passion and it's hard work. Had it gone wrong, I didn't have that plan B. When I look back, I really wish I'd worked really hard on my studies in the hope that the Air Force came good, as opposed to ignoring some of my studies because I had a place in the Air Force. And my last bit of advice is never give up. Never, ever give up. The system's really good at letting you know when enough is enough. But even when they say to you, as they said to me, I'm sorry, Garry, I don't think your hearing's good enough to join the Royal Air Force. I wrote back and I said, well, I'm sorry, I had a cold when I did the hearing test. Can I do it again, please? And I did the hearing test again and I passed. And I got in the Air Force and the rest, they say, is history. If I'd given up on that first hurdle, I would never have had the very rich and rewarding life that I've enjoyed. Yeah. Okay, it's probably, I'm a commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. And I was awarded that every year. The Queen, Her Majesty the Queen, grants birthday honours and she grants New Year honours. Also throughout the year, and it's largely hidden, it pops up occasionally in the papers, there are operational awards. And that's for people that have served on operations. And my award for the Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, so a CBE, is for the time that I spent in Italy, leading the United Kingdom's air contribution for Operation LME, which, as we talked earlier, was the operation over the skies of Libya. So I think the funniest moment I had in the Royal Air Force was, and this is, I think I can say this, but it's probably quite awful now, and you'll judge me and you'll think awful of me. When I went through flying training, we were summoned to go to a dining-in night, and I was a young acting pilot officer, and the station commander was a Jaguar pilot called Group Captain Tim Thorne, larger-than-life character, ordered us back because we were at a navigation detachment down in St Athan in Wales, actually. So we drove back, and I have no idea how it occurred. What we elected to do was to stop off on the way back at a battery chicken farm and convince the chicken farmer to allow us to buy a chicken off him because we said we were going off on a survival course and we're all allowed to take some sort of animal with us that we'd obviously have to, at some stage in the survival course, dispense and eat. So we duly sold this chicken to us. It cost us £5, and that was in 1987. So quite expensive. I'm sure we paid over the odds. And we took it back to Cranwell. And on that dinner night, there were about 150 of us in the officers' mess at Cranwell. And Group Captain Tim Thorne is standing there at the top of the table with his speech out, and he's mid-speech. I've been back to my room to get the chicken in my laundry bin, and I kind of crawled my way to the end of the top table, and I stood up and I emptied this chicken down the table, and this chicken spent the whole way on the top table, flapping its wings like this, trying to stop, and it came to rest right in front of the station commander, and big, larger-than-life man, Tim Thorne, and he said, "Chef, chef," and the chef came out of the kitchen. He said, "Get this chicken and take it to my house." And we all thought, oh, poor thing. And it was threadbare, this chicken, a battery chicken. It had hardly any feathers on it. Tim Thorne took this chicken back to his house and kept it as a pet. And for the next remaining year of his tour, this chicken faithfully delivered him an egg every morning for breakfast. So the press always goes after Air Marshal Bagwell, so that's never a bad thing. So the scariest moment for me, I've been very fortunate. I've never had to eject from an aeroplane. I've probably got two scary moments. One of which is in the air. They say that you're much better off being on the ground wishing you were in the air than being in the air wishing you're on the ground. And I did a mission over northern Iraq where I ended up losing my electrical power. And I was flying along with a wingman, so that's fine. If you lose your electrical power, you can start the auxiliary power unit, which I started up, which restores a lot of your electrical services. But it was the middle of the summer, the aircraft was really heavyweight, and I was at the furthest point before getting back to base on what we call bingo fuel, so just enough fuel to get back to base. Because of the limitations of the auxiliary power unit and the operating envelope, I was going to have to be really careful and tight about getting myself high enough and at the right speed to get back to base. In the course of doing that, what actually happened was the auxiliary power unit failed because I took it right to the edge of its envelope. So I was now over Iraq in a dead aeroplane. The engine was still working, but there was no power to the aeroplane. I couldn't see any displays. I couldn't see any instruments. It was daylight. And my wingman, a guy who remained nameless, because I then had to sort of plummet to earth because I put the engine into a manual fuel configuration. So I'm doing that, and the aircraft's going down while I'm resetting everything. And he lost visual with me. So I'm now over Iraq, and he doesn't know where I am. I don't know where I am. And it's not the friendliest of places. It never has been. And the airborne early warning aircraft, the AWACS, the Sentry aircraft, again, couldn't find me. So I'm at the point of going, right, what am I going to do now? The sun is setting. So if I keep going into sun, I know I'm going to fly into Syria, and that's a bad thing as well. I need to fly into Turkey and find somewhere to land. We had a diversion airfield. I knew where it was roughly. Didn't really know how to get there. And I'm up at sort of 20,000 feet. And actually, I made the decision. I said, right, I'm in a Harrier. A Harrier can land on a road. So what I'm going to do is I think the emergency airfield is over that way. I'm going to fly that way. When I get down to a certain fuel weight, if I have not come across that airfield, I'm going to land on a road. Once I'd made that decision, I was no longer scared, frightened, because I had a plan in my own mind. And actually, when you listen to it, you think, blimey, so you were prepared just to fly along and then either land on a road or reject. Yep, that's right. I'd made that decision. And actually, if you take that into the smaller scale, how many times do you come across a challenge? You go, oh my goodness, I'm out of my comfort zone. I don't know what to do. Oh, yes, I do. Let's make a plan. The whole of this is really scary. Let's attack a bit by bit. So that's that. Then I suppose the other scary bit is in my job, in my last job in defence, I went to some places that travel agents don't go to, such as Mogadishu in Somalia, where you're definitely in places where you'd rather not be, and you're not far away from people that probably don't want you to be in the same place as them. So both in the air and on the ground, I've had a fair share of adventure, but wind the clock back, I'll do it all again. And no, just from my perspective, really, thank you. Thank you so much to the adult volunteers and the staff, but because without you, the cadets would be nothing. And, you are very much the unsung heroes. And for the cadets, you should be really grateful for all of the work and effort that they put in, because it's just unbelievable. It makes such a big difference. Also, to the people that take people when we do get back to real drill nights, the people that take you there, the people that run you around, the people that organise you in terms of the grown-up aspects. It's really easy. And I know as when I was in your stage, I didn't see what that really meant. And it's only when you become a parent yourself. And again, I wish I'd known that earlier. But to the cadets, get the most out of it. You don't have to join the Air Force at the end of this, but I'd like to know why you wouldn't, because it's such a great career. But don't finish your time in cadets and sit down with one of your friends and say, I wish I'd done that DV. I wish I'd gone on that flying course, because those life experiences don't come past twice, and do them when you can.